Welcome, Rebels. In this episode,
kind of leaned into it a couple times about how you have taken off the beaten path and been countercultural. Can you give our audience some idea of what that experience like for you? Was it a lonely path? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, the path was always lonely. And only at moments of time when I connected with the divine in my own experience did I realize that I was never alone. Yeah, for some reason, I've surmised that our journey on the earth, this physical world, is a journey of isolation and loneliness. Unless one totally, completely surrenders oneself to something, someone, or in this life, or the divine, which is always with us internally. That's why I can understand how someone would just love to be in the mountains, in the caves. That's why I can understand, too, how someone would just love to be with their beloved in this life, or love to be running all their every day, 25, 30 miles a day, whatever, just, whatever. Then is when the loneliness, passes away. When one feels that unity, and no longer senses separation between self and not self.
you're listening to the Red Couch Rebels, a safe, comfy space for vulnerability and self-growth. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Erin.
We are seekers and self-advocates.
Yeah, we're not your doctors.
Or your therapists.
No, we're just fellow seekers on our own journeys of self-discovery.
Explore your inner rebel with us.
Let's sink in. Today, we have Michael Ketterhagen here with us. If you are local and from the Fond du Lac area and you are a seeker, there is no way you do not know this man's name and all the influence he has had throughout our community. He has touched so many hearts and so many lives between practitioners and yoga teachers and yoga students. His impact has been huge, and we are so glad to have him here on the Red Couch Rebels.
Yeah, I have heard so much about Michael when it comes to working with Ginny Gilmore, who's been on the podcast. Go back to, I think, is it episode 4 and 5, if you haven't listened to her episodes. But Michael is referenced in Ginny's books, and I know there's been so much in our learning and growing and talking about spirituality together that, you've learned a lot in your experience with the center.
Absolutely.
And just excited to hear Michael's journey and rebel experience.
Yes. So thank you for joining us.
I saw myself as a rebel, but I saw myself as sort of different and unique, and doing things that really sprung from my own heart and my own desire, and not necessarily, following the path, that other people have suggested or wanted to go on.
Yeah.
And that word may not have been something that you've considered for yourself, but that's the energy of what we're speaking to. Yeah.
I like to think of myself as countercultural. And,
That's the same.
Yeah.
and right. Yeah. The rebel is, to me, a term that would be used by someone younger than myself, because I was involved in the cultural revolution of the 60s. And of course, we really didn't, manifest that. I mean, I grew up in that, and on the farm, was pretty much steeped in the 50s style of life. And then when I got to the seminary and started to learn all kinds of other things about life and people, and started to really pursue what I wanted to do, what I thought I wanted to do. And of course, I still think I want to do that, but the structures don't permit that right now.
What was it? What do you mean? What did you really want to do?
I wanted to be a priest
Okay.
in the Roman Catholic Church.
And the structures don't permit that because you're married.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was heading in that direction until I met Mary, and then I realized that celibacy was going to be an issue for me.
Yeah.
And so, if celibacy wasn't a big deal, and that was only part of the reason that celibacy, I now learned and understand, happened in the 1100s, was because of the church saw that people who were married, husbands or priests who were married, and mostly it was male in those days. Actually, it was male only, and that then when they died, they passed their churches on to their children because that was the law. They passed their inheritance on, and so they forced celibacy so that the property of a church, which could be quite big in some areas, it's based upon the charism or the charismatic nature of the priest or the one there, goes right back then to the church. Which
So there's no family lineage. There's no one to hand it down.
Yeah, that gets in the way. Yeah, and so that hasn't really ever changed any, and it could have changed probably if they just would have changed some of the laws and structures of the time. But it's important to be able to take care of the kids of a pastor. I don't know how the Protestant traditions do it, but so that's part of the reason for the celibacy thing. It was a land grab on the part of the Catholic Church. Now, I shouldn't probably say that out loud.
See, he is a rebel.
But it's because it's too pejorative in the sense that it's suggesting that the only thing that the structured church is interested in is its continuation as the structure. And of course it is, because they wanted to keep the organization of Lord Jesus going. But then through that whole process, of course, they distorted the whole message of Lord Jesus in many ways.
Can we take a step back a little bit into how did you know that you wanted to go into the seminary? Give us some of your childhood experiences that led to that.
Well, my mother was very religious, excuse me. And one day, Father Himmer, I was in fifth grade at the time, had all the students in the fifth grade class write out what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I just came out with this whole idea, I would like to be a priest. And so he began to nurture that. And then so did Mom. And then I remember also when I was younger, practicing and doing what the priest did. I would take Mrs. Carl's fine bread and cut it into a circle and make a host out of it. And I would have my brother, my youngest brother, or my sister be the server. And I would go through the whole thing of practicing
acting it out.
Yeah. And so that became something significant. And then after a while, I just sort of set it aside until one of the other teachers that I was with, Sister, another nun, Sister Agnes Catherine was her name then. It's Joanna. She's now passed. She suggested that I go take the test at the seminary and see if I would be interested in that. Because every once in a while she'd find me instead of playing outside in the playground during playground time, I would be inside the church and sitting down kneeling. And I don't remember what I said or how I did, but I guess I was praying. And so that became something. I remember at the time, though, because everything was driven. I don't know if that's with you folks, but and I think that might be with most other human beings. Everything was driven to me by recognition from the outside world.
Yeah.
So I wanted to please the people in authority. And so I pleased Mom. I pleased Sister Agnes Catherine. And then I went on to move in that way. And I realized that structure that I was entering into would not be as helpful as it could be for me to grow and be happy and healthy and do what I wanted to do. So I changed the name from priesthood to I wanted to be involved with ministry. And that was a name that my mom liked. And she, even when we had children, when we moved to the farm, and when we did all kinds of other things, that, this is part of your ministry, right? So she would continue that sort of image and flow. So my rebelliousness, so to speak, came from deeper internal desires to be recognized and be thought of as valuable and worthwhile. And 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 then sometimes that valuable and worthwhileness thought that I had conflicted with what something inside me said I should do. So, and life went on from there in all kinds of directions.
For sure.
Yes. Yeah.
What was so I heard you say that it was a lot of outside pleasing in the actions that you were taking and the choices you were making when you're young. Do you remember much about your personal relationship with the divine when you were young?
Um, I never really had any personal encounters with the divine, like mystical experiences or anything like that. I do know that I always believed that God was with me, and I always believed that I was pretty good and doing the right thing. I never really questioned the existence of divine, and I just went on to try to understand what it was all about.
Mhm.
And so then I explored and did all kinds of things. I had a farm accident, and out of that farm accident, my when I was 14 years old, I was supposed to go to the seminary that year, and then I wasn't able to go that year, my freshman year in high school. So I had to get healed, and I realized that I was saved, so to speak, from dying, because the accident could have killed me very easily. Also could have crippled me very easily. The punctures that I had in my leg just went on both sides of my main ligament, the main arteries,
Yeah.
instead of cutting it off or something like that. Ended up with a short leg, but that was no big deal. Um, and then, so I realized that I was here for a reason, a purpose, and learned a lot of different things. I was usually pretty much an egotistical brat when I was younger. I was the oldest in the family, was the boss of the kids, and did everything that I was told to do. But that then helped me, uh, be sort of strong about what I thought was right. And then I went in the hospital and I saw all kinds of other people witnessing, or I was helpless at the time. So I needed to have some people take care of me all the time. And so all those people who took care of me then helped me realize that's not necessarily the way I should act. I mean, arrogance was not necessarily the way I should act in that whole idea. So I began to be to serve people as much as I possibly could. And then I went on to the seminary and began to study, and something inside me drove me in a direction of really exploring as much as possible, not only what I was taught, but also meaning and purpose at a deeper level. Another exciting thing that happened, I think, at the time, and I sort of absorbed it rather than consciously, dealt with it, was the Catholic Church was going through a renewal and a change of its own through the Vatican Council II in 1962 to 65, and that's when I was in the seminary. I started fall of 62 and graduated as a senior in spring of 65, and then I went on to theology at the seminary, and the theologians would teach us, or my teachers would teach us about what Vatican II was all about. And it was really an opening up of everything. It was looking at other religions. It was looking at what community really meant. And it's not just sitting and kneeling and rising and kneeling and bowing and giving all deference to all kinds of things that seems strange. Although at the time I was ingrained in that whole thing, because I was a server, and I would come home every Christmas and summer and be of service to the parish, as a acolyte and things like that, especially during the high seasons like Christmas and Easter. And then I began to really just sort of move in a direction that helped me understand things that were different. I began to, I don't know what triggered it, but I began to look at the rainbow and the chakras. I never really called them that at those times, but different sort of things. I was interested in healing because that's the path that I had sort of been on. And then I left the seminary, went and taught at.
Hold on 1 second. So
highest
you were
level.
interested in healing because that's the path you were on. Did that come out of your own injury and
Yeah.
the wounded healer healing thyself and diving into that, do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, the wounded healer thing is something that never really entered my thought patterns at all.
Consciously, right? Yeah. Mhm.
Until I started to realize that that's something that all of us are going through. All of us are coming on the planet here to heal our woundedness so that we can experience this oneness and this wholeness. And so all my studies, I realized I had, when I got out of the seminary, when I graduated from college with a bachelor's in classic philosophy, which is really medieval theology, and then I married. I began to then realize I wanted to do counseling because I thought it was okay. That would be something I'd like to do. And the counselor said, you can't really help anyone. The initial introduction to the counseling session, my doctor says, the purpose of counseling is not to help yourself. The purpose of education and counseling is to heal you, is not to help others, but is to heal yourself. And I thought, well, that was interesting. Didn't really believe it, but after a while, it made sense. And so unconsciously, intuitively, I was on that path of healing my own self as to developing and growing. So I would study all kinds of things that I was attracted to. And I let that inner drive of me, that inner spirit, lead my way. And of course, it was really different from the way other people lived their way. And I was always excited about the new possibilities, because the new ways of doing things that made sense to me. So I helped start a school within a school at Pius High School, Project Individualized Education, we called it. And the students would make their own learning goals, and then they would find the courses that fit those goals. And we'd have a small little community get together, and that would evolve. And then I realized after a while that was something that I wasn't necessarily drawn to as completely as I could have been. And so I then was applied for a youth ministry job at the Archdiocese, and I became the coordinator of youth ministers for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee for 5 years. And then in that process, I then delved more into the human development, the structured human development coursework. And that's my master's degree in human development. But then I also got into a program that was pretty much self-directed. So I developed my own learning path there too. And in the process, my whole master's dissertation was the transformation of the human culture internally and externally. So I explored that. And in that exploration, I built a greenhouse as part of my master's work. I started to move towards holistic health techniques and methods, got into the chiropractic world and all kinds of other things like that, and then began to learn and study yoga. And started to teach yoga mainly for my softball girls. I was the varsity softball coach. One of the teachers the athletic director at Pius High School said, "What would you like to try coaching?" And I said, "Sure," because I would always coach my kids. And so I every time for practice we would do yoga. I never called it that. I called it stretching, because in those days, and that was back in 1978, 78. No, yeah, 1978. Yeah, around there. And I started to, I had done yoga myself, but then started to teach, my athletes. And then gradually we became really successful with it. The team was state champions after those 3 years of coaching. And we really joined together. It was really a nice sort of process. Then I became the youth minister for the Archdiocese in 83.
Do you get exposed to yoga? Like, this is a big part of your later story.
Right.
So, like, I don't want to just skip over that you
Right.
found yoga. Like,
Yeah.
how did you find it? What was your first experience like? It sounds like it was more for the physical aspects.
It was. It was Richard Hittleman's book, 30-Day Yoga. And it was really a yoga training for military people at the time as a little book. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. And it goes through different process, an entire program on how to strengthen yourself and become strong. And I don't know exactly why I chose to that. It was, again, my rational mind was being led by my intuition of what felt right and what I thought I should do. And I knew that I wanted to begin to understand meditation as well. And so, because that was something that was another form of prayer that made sense to me as a Catholic, as a Christian. And sometimes now I probably shouldn't say this, so I won't.
Darn it. Let us have the juicy stuff, Michael.
Well, no, I mean, because this is a public.
Yes, it is. You have every right to edit.
And so if I say this, that people will already say, I told you so. And so for all these years, I'll couch it in another sort of direction. After studying and getting my my master's degrees through the Archdiocese and helping out and through St. Mary's College, University in Winona, Minnesota, I then began to teach in the university level, first at Cardinal Stritch, and then at Marian College first, and then at university. And I taught theology. And my study was practical theology. But I taught the regular standard Christian, synoptics and all the other historical and all the other aspects and I had to learn that stuff more because my doctoral work, which really sort of started with yoga in 1990, focused on experiential and pastoral aspects. See, I wanted to be a priest, and so that was pastoral. A good priest is not an intellect. A good priest is someone who loves people, cares for people, serves people, and does things to help them get to, quote, heaven or to become happy. And because of that, I wasn't considered technically as, I didn't go through a formal doctoral program at Fordham University or the University of Georgetown or Chicago Union Theological or Mundelein Seminary or other places like that. I developed my own.
Of course you did.
Yes. Yeah. And I worked and this was a perfect follow-up from what I had done at Pius High School, because at Pius High School, we worked with the University Without Walls, which came out of Antioch, Ohio. And so I had that background and then I got connected to the Union Institute, which usually is an offshoot of the University Without Walls system. And that system is, like I said, the learner sets his or her own goals and then finds the courses, finds the people, finds the material to fulfill that goal. Well, my goal was, because I always wanted this, was to experience God. And so because of my background with the Vatican Council and the opening up of that, not just the Catholic world, but looking at all the other worlds, I realized that Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Sufism, Islam, even the Taoists, and even though they didn't call, God the same name that I call God, were saying the same thing, that they wanted to say, they were talking about, but they, instead of like the Catholic world did, or the Christian world, and the Christian world is just starting to do that. The Catholic world is a little bit starting to do it slower. They didn't teach you how to do it, how to experience God. They said, just have faith, just have faith, just have faith. Go and follow the sacraments, follow the sacrament. That didn't make any sense, as a scientific person that I was. And that's what my philosophy degree is. Medieval theology is really science. It's medieval science, because all those Duns Scotus, Copernicus, Galileo, all those guys were monks. And it all started out with the difference between science today and science then is, today we do not assume the existence of spirit. Today we do not assume the existence of God. We only say that we experience truth is only what we experience physically, materially. So it's an empiricism that is just materialistic. However,
Even quantum physics,
yes, the people who are quantum physicists don't go into quantum physics to explain the spirit. They go into quantum physics to find out how this universe operates. And many of them have a agnostic understanding of reality, or an atheistic understanding of reality, where they say, well, no, there's no such thing as spirit, but I know that things are happening. And so they begin, and then eventually sometimes they switch their thinking and say, there must be an intentional force behind this whole stuff.
Finding in quantum physics, they may have been led there through their intellect, and agnostic to me would just mean, that you don't know. Right.
Correct.
So,
That's
and
what it means.
that is a foundation of a good scientist, is to allow for the answer to be whatever it is. Right. So if you go in with the assumption, you're looking for that answer.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, in my experience, which I'm not a quantum physicist, and nor do I personally know any of them, but in my own hobby study of what they're finding in quantum physics, how can you deny the spirit once you're in it? I think they're finding it there, which is resulting in the slip there.
Well, whether you like this idea, whether you like this or not, there are many who just totally, completely say it's all physical.
Sure.
And it's amazing, but there are some that do. And that's, of course, what the medieval scientists, they immediately knew that there was a creator because of their belief system. And they said, okay, well, all this stuff is happening. How does the creator create? How does the creator do this and do that? And so they then explored the heavens. They then explored the little parts of the sort of microscope. They found the tools then to observe that the divine is operating in the world. And of course, those two worlds now have been completely separated, the spirit world and the material world, in most people's heads, because of modernism. And modernism is that the only thing that's real is what you can experience. Even, this is part of my philosophy degree, even the modernist philosophers talk about, what's the term that's used? The rational therapists, they say it's all mind. It's not anything else. And so they begin to then say that we are creating what we see, that we are creating what we do. It's the positivists, empirical positivists. They're talking about that. But that's another issue of philosophy and stuff. And that could be talked about at lots of other times. But
all these different ways to explore reality.
Yes.
Right?
Well, in fact, the positivists are correct that our mind is creating pretty much what our reality is. One example that happened for me was that it really was true. I had, when I was growing up, I had a real, not growing up, but when I had younger children, and we were on the farm, we developed a religious lay community, and we were on a farm similar to what you have here at the Zentler farm, trying to develop a religious beatitudinal type of community where we live according to the Spirit and according to the words of Lord Jesus. But I realized that I wanted to cut this beard off. So I gathered the kids together. Mary went to bed. She was tired. I gathered the kids together and I shaved my beard off. And after I shaved it all off, one of the kids said, and I did this on purpose because I knew I would probably look different after I shaved my beard. And then one of the kids said, "Oh, you look like Uncle Phil and Dad." And I said, "Oh, geez, I didn't want to look like Uncle Phil and Dad. I wanted to look like my mom in my head." And so I realized that, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, I started to look like Mama. And I realized that was my mental constructs. In the yoga world, it's called our vasanas, and it's or samskaras, and that shapes the physical realities that we have. So the logical positivists, that's what they're called, logical positivists. They say that we are creating our reality. We are creating all this stuff. And there's a unity that goes on between people creating a similar sort of reality. Although even though we're here right now, the reality that you and I have, all three of us together, is not the same reality. Each of us are seeing a different reality. But that's another issue. They're right, but they don't realize. I mean, the logical positivists say that we're right, but then they say that it's all us that's doing it. And they ignore the fact that there's more to us than just our body and our mind, that there is this spirit. And it's really the spirit that is that's the life force, but it's the mind that's manipulating and organizing and presenting the spirit to this manifest physical world that we have. So yes, but that spirit is not egotistically the small ego. That spirit is the big universal spirit. That's the spirit of the creation of the world and the universe. And I found out that through yoga, I might be able to access that I might be able to experience that. And so I used that yoga tradition to understand what all the other traditions were saying. And they were all saying the same thing. The way to experience God is through meditation. Meditation takes on different forms. And the yoga form, the form that I'm experiencing and knowing and understanding, is very similar in basic techniques and basic structure as all the other forms. In Christianity, there's centering prayer and also mantra meditation. In Buddhism, there's the lotus of the heart meditation, and it's really using a mantra as well. But the whole basis of meditation is experiencing the singular one-pointedness of the light that directs us. And a person can experience that in different ways. I think there are some people who have those mystical experiences and they see it from the outside. And I'm thinking more and more in my reflections on this, that really is a projection of the divine from within. And
have you had one of those experiences? A mystic?
If I did, I wouldn't necessarily tell you.
Well, I'm just saying, like, how did you come to the conclusion or this theory that it is a projection? And what I was wondering if you had the experience yourself and then through reflection or meditation recognize that it was a projection, or is it a thought process that you're supposing it?
Right now, that's a rational understanding of what I have read about so many people who have experienced mystical experiences and so many people who are sensitive to the energy patterns in the universe and the energy patterns that come from our hearts and come from the other energy centers of the body. I may have had that experience, but it's not something that I would, necessarily write home about,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean that in any way about ego or anything. I was just curious how you came to that conclusion or idea that it's a projection.
I've oftentimes, um, the distinction for me between the rational world and the intuitive world is often blurred, in the sense that my intuition tells me things, and then I try to make sense of it in the rational world. And sometimes so I may have, and that's what I'm trying to make sense of, out of that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it may not have, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I do know that the divine exists, and I have experienced that divine in myself. So I know.
And was that through your journey, throughout your whole journey, or is that through a process of what you've done on your yogic journey?
For me, it's been periodic revelations throughout my life. And now I know that I probably had, because according to the yoga tradition, we don't just live this one small little life of ours of 77 years for me now, and whatever, maybe it'll be 90, I never know. I might know by the time it gets closer. The that I may have learned a lot of these things before, and that my journey in this period of physical life was to clean up some of the stuff that I did in the past, which is what everyone calls karma, amends, and to learn more and more that I am divine, and with the body and the mind. So then my world here is to learn that, and then to be of service to other people.
It's pretty big.
And so out of that, those hunches that come from deep within me have done all kinds of interesting things.
Do you connect those hunches, and you've used the word intuition? Do you also connect that back if if you are divine, that intuition is also divine guidance?
Oh yes, oh yeah. The Divine Mother talks to me all the time. Whenever I'm all of a sudden, when something comes into my mind, I know it's not me. I know it's the Divine Mother saying something to me, and if I don't respond, then I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And by respond, I mean if I don't listen. And the Divine Mother is so loving. I mean, this Divine Mother is my understanding of God. The Divine Mother is so loving. Excuse me. Is so loving that she allows me to make all kinds of mistakes. And then reminds me again, okay, now you have another opportunity here. So, and that causes problems. So I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but you've had a hunch in your own relationships with someone, and you say it to someone, and someone says, "Yeah, you're crazy. You're not going to do that, are you?" And then you realize that if you do it, it might be a real break in the relationship that you have with that person, or it might be a real, controversy. To use a nice, gentle term, to use a violent term, an argument, and then one or the other. This is why relationships are so hard, especially committed relationships, where you commit yourself to another person, and you don't know really what's going to happen in the future. And it means constantly just being open to all that possibility, because there's a reason for the commitment in the first place. But lots of times we don't want to see it. But it's so hard because it means then that sometimes one has to just pause on what one's intuition is, or it means that one has to go and totally unique and different direction and set aside that love and relationship. And so that's also part of our journey in my history.
Just thinking into that divine mother love. I didn't use the word, but I experience it as like unending patience. Like, like it's the opportunity is there. You feel the nudge, maybe again. Maybe it's been there many times before. And I still feel a allowing of you're gonna do what you're gonna do. You're either gonna listen this time and you're gonna try it different, or you're gonna do what you did before. But I still feel loved no matter what my choice is. And like when you
Correct.
felt the emotion of that, it really resonates with me because there are times when I'm not ready. I'm not ready to listen to the nudge yet. I need the reminder that the nudge is there, right? That this
Yes.
is my next step. But sometimes I just don't feel ready and to be loved anyways, regardless of my choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is part of my own experience of why I developed cancer. I thought I was a pretty happy and joyful person, most of my life. Then I got blood cancer, which is a sign of bitterness, deep-seated bitterness. And it surfaced because of certain things that happened at the job that I had. And I didn't think I was recognized enough and wasn't given the opportunity to do all the things that I thought I needed to do. And so I realized then that that's how the cancer began to develop. So now I'm working on just letting go of all that judgment and anger and bitterness and devaluing in my mind. It was and that's all a mental thing is. And that's what I'm learning now. I need to just really just be totally grateful for whatever has happened. And that came to me when I was in the midst of saying no to a stem cell transplant. And the Divine Mother allowed my stem cells to come out so that I had enough so that we could do the transplant. And then I realized that after that, I was then going to go strictly a natural way. I was going to work on the cancer naturally and do all kinds of other things that I needed to do. Of course, that would mean, it would have meant, even though my Mary was such a lovely woman, such a saint, would have said I could do whatever I wanted to do, even if I were doing something that would die the next day. Of course, that's what she said. And of course, it's hard to really mean that. But then I then finally realized that it's possible to go the medical route, because I was very much a teacher of non-medical route, and the conventional world of medicine really is only for acute cases. And of course, my case with the stem cell with the multiple myeloma was acute at the time. When they found out that I had it, my kidneys were failing, and I was at 12% function rather than the regular 90 that I was supposed to be at. And so things began to switch around. So I began to realize that now I need to then work at healing through the medical world and the holistic health world. So I'm joining those two together in my work right now. And it was a real struggle knowing what it is that I should, because all that nudging went one way or another. Take the natural, go to the natural, go to the natural. It was always constantly there. But then I realized that it didn't matter what I did, the Divine Mother would love me anyway. So this is what I'm doing. Yep.
I'm really trying to take in like this overarching view of what has transpired through your journey. Like, can you see any threads through your lifetime? You have the faith, right? You've always had the faith.
I think faith really is a very strong part of the whole process. There was a time when it's interesting that what happens to people who do theological training is that they lose their faith and they begin to just delve into the rational world and say, well, it's all rationalism. It's all critical analysis of the texts, or it's all this or that. And it's a real struggle that everyone that goes through it, at least that's what I found out in talking to the other theologians, until they have an experience of the divine. When they have an experience of the divine, then they begin to see, oh, I don't have to worry about this. God does it. Now I just have to figure out what God's all about, through this whole process. And that's that whole process. So yeah, faith was there, although it had the ripples. And
hold on one second. I'm curious about this because I would have assumed that theologians went into it because they had divine experience.
That would be great.
Yeah, that's what I would assume.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But instead, it's like you're seeking, and then it's circling back.
What I learned was people think they have the experience of the divine, but the mind is so interesting that it always has this doubt. Why? Why is the doubt there? Because we have not had a experiential encounter with that divine. It was always an intellectual encounter. And that starts with school. Maybe children have the experiential encounter when they see the butterfly or where they see this or that. They have that experience, especially if someone says, oh, isn't God lovely? Especially if they had that word, from mom or dad in the background and stuff like that. And then they experience God through their nature, through the unicorns, through the fairies, through that, all the, and then they're also taught too that the experience that they have, maybe they experience grandma at the foot of their bed, and when they're 4 or 5 years old, waking up and grandma's there. She's dead 5 years. Grandma's there. No, she's dead a couple of years or so, maybe a couple months or so. She gets up and the child gets up and experiences this. Grandma, what are you doing? Well, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. But I wanted to tell you, I know how close you are to Grandpa, that Grandpa's going to be joining me pretty soon. So just don't be afraid. And so you're really excited. And then you fall back to sleep again, as a child. And it's a dream, but it's not. It's more than a dream. And then you go downstairs and you tell mom and dad about it. Oh, I saw Grandma. And they say, oh, that's nice. You had such a wonderful dream. And they dismiss it. And the reality of the presence of the divine becomes rooted just in the right brain. And it becomes pushed out as the left brain develops. And the left brain is our logical brain, our organization brain, our thinking brain, our rational brain, and all that stuff, to put it into a biological term. And therefore, Santa Claus doesn't exist anymore. Therefore, the tooth fairy doesn't exist anymore. And what happens is we need to go through that developmental process. And that's sometimes what happens for theologians who are studying theology. They think they have had this experience, or maybe they have had this experience, but then all of a sudden their left brain, because that's what the university is all about, it's left brain training. There's no hard, unless you're in music or something like that, even music is left brain, or art or stuff like that. Unless you're in a classroom that just really allows the creativity just to flow, which is rare in a university setting for sure, you are organizing and saying, oh, this is it, and you're logically becoming a logical positive. And it's because you're organizing the whole thing. And out of that process, then there has to be a constant development where the left brain no longer stays in charge, but there begins to be a joining of the left and the right brain. And that's only done, in my experience, through stilling that left brain, through meditation processes, or Tai Chi, or addictive, positive addictions like running, where you're just out there running, and all of a sudden you have this out of the body experience, so that was one of the books, positive addiction. Well, I don't remember the author, who helped me realize that we can't experience this reality beyond our physical and material reality through not only meditation, but when we still the mind and allow the rational mind, the thinking mind, to not take charge, to not be in charge anymore. Because our mind is constantly spinning, constantly thinking, constantly rotating. And it's only when it's focused on one thing, our breath, or the light, or a mantra, or a word, can it start to know that there's something else beyond our rational thinking. So
in my experience and what I've heard from other people, and I'm going to hesitate myself to say this, but it's, what about when the logical mind is forced to stop because you've reached a point of pain in your life where the beliefs and stories that you've held for so long and just are not serving you. They fail you and it shuts down. And when that happens, it feels like an opening for the divine to do downloads or to touch your soul. Like that doesn't feel like the same as meditation to me. But I've heard of people having these experiences, and I've had it myself. So how do you relate those two?
meditation is not the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is the process
Sure.
that one takes to get to that point where the left brain stops.
Mm-hmm.
Jill Taylor Bolte has a TED Talk on the, forget what the name of her.
Was she the one that had a stroke?
Yes.
Yes, I remember that.
The stroke. Beyond. Yes. The one who had the stroke. She, in a scientific manner, says the same thing that I'm talking about when one learns, not because of a shock, not because of a stroke, not because of something else, but once one learns through yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, some that meditative process, when one begins to, and it becomes, as is in the literature of all the mystics, an experience of grace, an experience of a gift. Faith is, and then one really knows. When one experiences that, and it's the mind, one experiences the essence of one's mind at that time, because it even goes beyond the right brain or the visual imagery, aspects of our thinking systems. But it's that one pointedness that's what it is that we need to experience in order to experience the divine. Meditation is a way there. Centering prayer is a way there. The Buddhist traditions are a way there. The Taoist world's practices like Tai Chi and other things is a way there. The Judaism is Mishnah, and that's another way there. Repeat a word over and over again, or repeat a phrase
you
over and over again.
All these things are practices. So in essence, you say it needs to be earned.
No.
But if it's a practice that you
No.
have to work towards, wouldn't that imply that it's something you have to earn?
You learn it, and the gift then is there sometimes. See, scientifically, everything that we do has a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So have you earned the fact that you are a woman? Have you earned the fact that you breathe?
Mm-hmm.
No. You do it. And the consequence is your life. It's the same thing. That's scientific reality. Every action is an opposite and equal reaction. Every action has a consequence. That's karma.
Sure, but there's a discipline that comes to the things that you're saying. That
exactly.
But there's no discipline to my autonomic nervous system having me breathe. There's no discipline.
Yes, there is. You're just not aware of it.
Well, the discipline is a conscious thing. When you're talking about practice.
No. I'm talking about that the spirit world and the physical world are one. The discipline would be the discipline to breathe properly is a conscious thing. But when you're a child in the bed and you're watching the baby in the bed, the belly goes up and down. The child's not thinking that that's what I should do. It's part of the natural pattern of our spirit. And so, but everything that we do sets that pattern in the brain and sets that pattern in the mind. And then if we keep doing that, then we have developed a pattern that allows us to experience something that we would intend to have hoped to experience. And lots of time I'm realizing that it's really a grace, that the experience of the divine is really a gift, no matter how hard I work at it.
I think
can't
you know me as a rebel. I've always believed in infinite paths, so you're always going to get some resistance from me when it feels limited in any way. Like all of my spiritual friends throughout the years would probably say they've heard me say it a million times. It's infinite paths. So I respect what you're saying, that all of these religions have, or whatever word religion doesn't sit right. All of them have practices or a way that are probably very similar by nature to get to the same end, right?
In this experience that I've had in this earthly experience, there are a lot of, as you say, paths. I would call those practices. And you're right. There are an infinite number of them. And we may be experiencing only some of them in this specific, path of the universe, or this specific universe that we're in. So you're not saying anything that is denying what I'm saying at all.
Right. Right. Well, and it could even
using
be
different terms.
It could even be in that denial of the nudge. Like each of us has our own path, right? Like, because if we're accepting or denying that intuitive nudge to go a certain way, our path is going to look different. Like you said, each time we do that, there are consequences to it, right? So even I have infinite paths that I could be taking through this life to get to the same end.
Correct.
Right. So it's just that's just magnified and multiplied times everybody who's here.
Right. And then there are other things that have to be taken into account in order to say yes to that path or no to that path, or to ignore that. Yes. Yep. Right. Yeah. That's why in relationships of us as individuals, with the relationship is so hard and demanding and challenging.
Speaking of relationship, you had kind of leaned into it a couple times about how you have taken off the beaten path and been countercultural. Can you give our audience some idea of what that experience like for you? Was it a lonely path? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, the path was always lonely. And only at moments of time when I connected with the divine in my own experience did I realize that I was never alone. For some reason, I surmised that our journey on the earth, this physical world, is a journey of isolation and loneliness. Unless one totally, completely surrenders oneself to something, someone, or in this life, or the divine, which is always with us in turn. That's why I can understand how someone would just love to be in the mountains, in the caves. That's why I can understand, too, how someone would just love to be with their beloved in this life, or love to be running all their every day, 25, 30 miles a day, whatever, just whatever. Then is when the loneliness, passes away. When one feels that unity, and no longer senses separation between self and not self.
Think about we would call it inner rebel. You said it's countercultural nudges. Do you feel like those were always fairly divinely guided, or do you think there were other influences on those countercultural?
Yes, I think there are other influences.
Okay.
My past life influences.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so my past life, because of certain things that I've done there and certain things that I'm supposed to do now because of that, or certain desires that I had, or certain accomplishments that I had in those past lives, and I just want to fill them again in this life, when that might not be exactly what I'm supposed to do.
Sure.
So the nudges come from deep in the yoga world. They're called vasanas, which means vasana is a word which means color. So it colors my whole perception of reality, my whole perception of what I'm supposed to do and be. And I'm not aware of those until they come up. It's like the 6 or 7 year old child who, for the first time, sees a grand piano and starts playing Mozart. And there's documentation of that happening. I mean, people have done it. Kids have done that. Those are vasanas according to the yoga world.
Yeah.
Those are hidden, unconscious realities that are pushing us. And that if they didn't bear enough fruit in the past life, they then nudge ahead to bear fruit in this life.
So what were some of those countercultural steps that you took and followed?
Well, we moved out to country, to the farm, with two other people, another couple. We started a religious lay community called the Grain of Wheat Community. And we legalized it and made a nonprofit corporation, and we wanted to develop a self-sustained religious, lay community. And we were there together for a while, and there were sometimes as many as 26 people were involved with it, and then it got shrunk down to 8 or 9 or 10, and then it was just the two families, and then it was just us as as an individual, a nuclear family, and of course then realized that whole dream of starting that type of community, even though it's still really strong in me, I'd love to be able to, be part of that, and I must have been part of something like that in the past. Still wants to see that happen, and where I would be the spiritual director of that whole thing, and just worked out in the garden and said, I'd love to go and be on a farm and just help out.
A lot of people that have this dream, a lot. We hear it quite frequently. And I don't, maybe it's a return to tribal at times, right? Where we lived in smaller communities and we were able to see and honor individuals and have a space and have belonging and a shared mission and home. It feels like the idea of it feels like safetyness and home.
Right. Well, it was a big movement in the 60s, with all the small hippie communities that developed and so we sort of then developed that, and then of course it came to an end. Mary for years never felt home and happy with this. She always followed along, and of course that was destructive to her. And one day I got a phone call from her, and she said, "If we don't move from this damn place, I'm leaving." It's like, I said, "Oh, okay, I guess we kind of move." And so, because I never wanted to separate from Mary enough. So
it didn't bring her a sense of belonging in her.
Oh, no, she didn't feel at home there. And Mary feels at home cooking for people. So she bakes for me, cooks for everyone else. We're both gluten-free, and Mary bakes gluten-free stuff, but then she bakes gluten stuff and gives it to neighbors.
That's great.
And so Mary knows how to build community. I never really did. I thought give people the vision and the idea, and they'll come. No, that's not the way it works in this culture. You have to have relationships, and they have to have work on things and stuff, make it happen and only involve. So that was one thing that happened. Another thing was my educational path. I went out of the box all the time. I sought out a University Without Walls master's program. I sought out a University Without Walls PhD program. And if I didn't get the program, I wouldn't have been continuing teaching at Marian University. And everyone's, not everyone, but a lot of people thought of me not really Catholic. And of course, I knew I was. I bled Catholic. I knew exactly what Catholic theology was because I knew what Christ's mission and purpose was. And I lived it. And I worked on it. And I wanted to teach it in that way too. But so I developed a number of courses at the university there, all centered around my PhD, which was spirituality and healing. And I was the first one in the States that I know of who had a doctorate in spirituality and healing. Since then, University of Minnesota has a department of spirituality and healing. Now, I've never explored it. I don't even know what they do, but I know what I would do if I developed something like that. So, and I have that curriculum still prepared, but never really. The people that I worked with promised to help me make it go happen, but their heart wasn't in it, so they didn't. Then, of course, I moved away from Marian, and health and healing was a really important thing because that's what my doctoral dissertation was: the Fond du Lac Center for Spirituality and Healing Theory, Design, and Business Plan.
And I think we're going to do a deep dive on that center's journey in part 2.
Oh,
yeah, I really would love to hear more, like really get into some deep aspects of what that looked like. Sorry, I'm making your microphone bounce around as my arm is moving.
Yeah, and that would be important to you because you were part of that whole journey too.
Yes, absolutely. I was, and many people were.
Yes.
Many people have been, and I would love to explore your experience, your dream, what you learned, the whole thing. Like, I would really love to dive into that. But before we wrap up part 1, is there anything else you'd like to say about like your backstory? I mean, you have so much lived experience, and you're bringing forward some concepts that we haven't really talked about before. Is discerning between is this past life baggage that we're carrying, samsaras that we're trying to live out again, or is this really your inner truth? So like discerning between these two things, is it divine guidance, whatever language you use, right? But that's something that hasn't really been brought forward by other rebels.
Yeah, not at all. And I mean, it's fascinating. I'll share candidly. I'm thinking back to the conversation where Scott was on the couch here, and he was saying, he feels like a baby, and I'm feeling like a baby in my faith in divine connection and relationship building right now. But there's so much that's been shared and explored here that is really piquing my curiosity. And what I'm walking away with is that that divine connection and guidance is within us. And I think how you speak to the left and the right brain, and really I don't know if it was a merging or meshing of them. Like, I feel like I've been experiencing that, but my rational brain was always in there saying, oh no, whatever, that's nothing, right? You're just making that up. That doubt has come in. And so it's just,
it's always there until you experience things. And it also connects, this is something that's really significant to you here. It also connects with this whole idea of sexuality. The masculinity and the femininity aspects of us as human beings. And I've done a lot of thinking and exploring that.
Yeah, I mean, that's language that we use quite a bit.
I know.
Masculine.
That's why I mentioned it, because I know there'll be something that you might want to explore or hear my thoughts on. Not that it's important that you hear my thoughts, but I think it is.
It's always fun to explore.
Yeah, it's, sharing and hearing your story, and then obviously merging it in with our own experiences. There's definitely things we can grow around.
One thing that was really helpful for me is that I probably, after this, I'll probably go back and look at what I said, because lots of times I've learned that I unfold things and bring things out in my conversations that I never really crystallized in thought prior to conversation.
So just going with the flow on it. Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, as we've been doing this work, now we have all these conversations recorded, and when we're done with the recordings, like, most of us don't even remember what was said. Like, we're left with like these key points that really struck something in us, right? but it's 2 hours of conversation. So you can't remember everything. But in this now we have it recorded. So when I go back through the editing process, I get to hear it again and it sinks in another layer. And maybe I didn't quite hear it the way that it was said the first time that I heard it, right? Because if you're thinking, you have a thought that's going over here while you're talking, I couldn't really be present with what you said. So I get to hear it again. So I'm actually loving the process of the podcast sometimes. Sometimes I say things and I'm like, do I have to listen to myself say that again and again and again in the editing process? That's not so much fun. But in general, we get to sink into this same conversation multiple times in our process. And it's bringing something new in the way that our relationships in this conversation get to have more life than just this 2-hour block.
Yeah.
It's part of our journey to wholeness.
Good.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Red Couch. We would love if you would head on over and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It helps us tremendously as we rebel against the status quo of disconnection. We need you. We appreciate you. You can also head on over to our website, redcouchrebels.com, to send us a note and explore your inner rebel with us on our online network. We'd love to see you there.